books often miss when memory is sacred. Silence becomes rehearsal and every spoken word must be worthy of its echo. The sun has begun to fall, painting the horizon in deep copper. The Griot compound settles into a quiet rhythm again. Children gathered near the fire, elders reclining in soft shadows, the soft trill of the cora floating lazuli from within the central hut. The day is nearly done, but the work of memory is not done, because here, in this circular cluster of mud walls and wisdom, the end of the day is the beginning of remembrance. In the largest room of the compound, lamps have been lit, not candles, but small oil dishes that cast low, flickering light on the walls that hold no paintings but echoes. It is here, each evening, that the Griot family meets. No stage, no audience, just one another. This is not a performance, it's preservation. The eldest Griot, seated at the center, begins not with a story, but with a name, just one. The name is spoken slowly, almost reverently. A pause follows, then another name, then a story, a brief one, a lesson folded into a laugh, a sigh, a child's mistake in a rainstorm, a donkey that refused to carry salt, a prince who once bowed too low and fell into a bowl of stew. And then, deeper stories, a woman who healed a war wound with an herb known only to her clan, a son who walked to Timbuktu to learn Arabic only to return and teach Mand history to the scholars, a famine, a marriage, a betrayal, a reconciliation. All are remembered. This is not nostalgia, it is maintenance. This is how the Griot house keeps its balance. Even in this intimate circle, the structure remains. Elders speak first. Youth respond only when invited. Interruptions are rare. If someone forgets a name, they pause, they wait. Someone will recall, and if no one does, the name is held in silence until it returns in someone's dream. Because here, silence is not absence, it is memory preparing itself. And while the world beyond the compound changes, cities growing, radios humming, languages shifting, the Griot tradition endures. Not because it resists change, but because it moves through it, adapts. A Griot today might speak on a microphone, might record an album, might teach in universities, but the compound, the heart dash remains. In modern West Africa, Griots still officiate weddings, still mediate feuds, still remind presidents of their place in the long arc of lineage. And when the Griot speaks, even the powerful listen, because his or her words come not from opinion, but from depth, from memory, from centuries stacked like bowls. Back in the courtyard, the night wind picks up, the children have gone quiet. Someone plays the balafon gently, a farewell to the day. The flames dim. And as you rise to leave, you take one last look at the compound, not grand, not gilded, but filled with something rare, a place where stories are not told to be consumed. They are told to be carried. And as you walk away, you ask yourself, what would our world look like if we valued memory not as information, but as inheritance, and if we listened not to be entertained, but to be entrusted with what must never be forgotten? The year is 107 CE. The Roman Empire is at its greatest territorial extent, stretching from the windswept moors of Britannia to the sandy banks of the Tigris. Roads stone straight and smooth crisscross the continent like veins, and on those roads, under a pale morning sun, a man walks with urgency. He is not a soldier, not a priest, not a senator. He is a Tobularius, a Roman courier, and strapped to his back is a leather satchel filled with scrolls, wax tablets, and carefully wrapped papyri. There are no stamps, no envelopes, no zip codes, but he will not get lost, because Rome had a system, not a simple one, not a fast one, but one that moved messages across mountains, deserts, and provinces with astonishing reliability. This is the story of how an empire managed its mail. You begin in a small mansio, a roadside postal station somewhere outside of Lugdunum, modern-day Lyon. It's little more than a stone rest stop, 2 mules tied to a wooden post, a cistern for water, and a shaded bench. But here, a message changes hands. The first courier has completed his leg of the journey. He passes the dispatch sealed with wax, pressed with the signet of a provincial governor to the next runner. The seal is checked, the scroll is logged, a sip of watered wine, a handful of olives, and the courier is off again toward Narbo through Gaul. This is Cursus Publicus, the Roman postal system. It was founded under Augustus and refined by later emperors. It wasn't for the public. It was an elite, state-run network used to carry messages between officials, generals, and the imperial court. It worked through relay stations every 8 to 12 miles, spaced along Rome's immense road network. But how did it work without modern addresses? Each message carried several key pieces of information, the destination city, written clearly. At the start of the message, the recipient's name and title, to avoid confusion between citizens with similar names, landmarks, or district details, often referencing temples, baths, or markets near the recipient's home or office. The sender's seal, guaranteeing authenticity and protecting against tampering. The accuracy relied on two things: local knowledge and the memory of messengers. A tabularius was not just a runner. He was often a regional expert. He had to know which Marcus was the right Marcus, and whether he lived near the Temple of Saturn or the wheat granaries. Some letters even included hand-drawn maps. Others came with verbal instructions passed along by word of mouth. In Rome itself, urban delivery was messier. Messages were often entrusted to slaves, who carried notes between villas, forums, and senatorial homes. These messengers wore no uniforms. They moved quietly, frequently, and invisibly across the marble city. In the provinces, longer-distance communication relied on the strength of Roman infrastructure. The roads were crucial. Paved in layers of stone and gravel, they resisted wear and water. Milestones marked distances. Way stations provided fresh mules or horses for those carrying official diplomatic travel warrants, issued by the emperor. Couriers with these warrants could commandeer transport, demand shelter, and bypass checkpoints. It was mail with imperial authority, and yet delays were frequent. Storms flooded roads. Snow blocked passes in the Alps. Messages went missing. Rumors often traveled faster than scrolls. To address this, some messages were sent in duplicate or even triplicate. Different routes, different couriers, a redundancy system far ahead of its time. But what about security? Messages were sealed with wax, yes, but sometimes sensitive letters were coded. Not ciphers, but oblique references, hidden meanings, or symbolic phrasing only the intended recipient could interpret. If a message was intercepted, it might seem mundane, discussing grain shipments or temple repairs, but carried warnings or orders within. Rome's enemies envied this system. Some tried to copy it, others tried to sabotage it. But the roads held, and the runners ran. And so now, as you walk alongside a courier heading south on the Via Appia, passing stone columns and olive groves, you marvel at the rhythm of it all. No postal trucks, no sorting centers, just sandals, scrolls, and a road that never ends. And you begin to ask, in a world before zip codes and satellites, how did an empire stay so connected, and what did they understand that today's speed has somehow forgotten? Midday settles across the Roman landscape. The sun is high, the air thick with warmth, and the sandals of couriers beat steady rhythms into the stone road. One messenger pauses at a shaded taberna, quickly washing dust from his hands before passing a wax-sealed scroll to a waiting stationarius, a station scribe who logs each item like a border guard of information. No one here needs a street address, because the Roman system ran on something older than paper or postmarks. It ran on memory. Hierarchy and geography woven together like thread. Let's follow a message. It's from the governor of Britannia, addressed to a legatus in Massilia, modern-day Marseille. The message is clear but formal. Reports on a shipment of silver intercepted by northern raiders. It's marked Celerime, urgent. The scroll is wrapped in leather and tied with string. The seal bears the governor's ring, a lion beneath, a laurel. It changes hands at 3 different Monchones way stations that house fresh mounts, food, and shelter for couriers on official duty. Each relay point has a master, someone who records the incoming and outgoing mail, assigns the next rider and ensures the message continues its journey. The couriers themselves are rarely the same person for the whole distance. They're a chain, a moving nervous system across the empire's body. And while the message travels south, we travel east to Rome itself. Here in the capital, postal work looks very different. In the forum, messages are not carried by mounted couriers, but by house servants, city messengers, or scribes known as librari and amanuenses. These professionals manage the flow of information inside the city walls, tax receipts, construction reports, legal summonses, and endless senatorial correspondence. Without numbers or block codes, direction depends entirely on human understanding. Take this to the house of Lucius Cornelius near the Temple of Vesta. You'll pass the fig market, turn left at the fountain, and ask the olive seller to point you toward the atrium with the red-tiled roof. This was a common instruction. Everyone in Rome relied on networks of human guides, vendors, bathhouse attendants, market women, even beggars who served as living street signs. Buildings had names, not numbers. Domus Fulvia, Villa Aventina, Insula Julia. They were known by ownership, by history, or by legend. And large homes displayed a titulus, an inscription plaque above the entrance. But most messengers found their way through a kind of mental cartography, a deep, unspoken familiarity with the city's physical and social terrain. And in times of change, those couriers adapted quickly. When Emperor Hadrian began his architectural renovations across the empire, including Rome's own layout, couriers had to relent parts of the capital like muscle memory. In emergencies, imperial messages were hand-delivered across long stretches of the empire by a special class of couriers, known as speculators, military scouts turned messengers. These men carried not only speed and seal, but sword. They delivered war orders, summonses, sometimes even death sentences, but most mail was more mundane. A senator writing to his brother about a debt, a merchant arranging grain shipments, a scribe copying a legal request to be filed in the temple archives. Every scroll was a glimpse into a system that connected humans across thousands of miles. Without electricity, printing presses, or tracking codes. And at the heart of it, there was trust. Not in machines, not in ink. In people. In the man who knew the path through the mountains, in the woman who remembered every villa along the Tiber, in the scribe who never misspelled a name, in the rider who didn't ask questions, only ran. You return now to the side of the road where another courier dismounts at a rest station. He drinks from a cistern, checks the condition of the scroll, then prepares to run the next 10 miles toward the coast. No address, no number. But somehow the message will arrive, and as you watch him disappear into the dust and silence of the road, you ask, what happens when connection is built not on speed, but on the memory of 1,000 roads and the reliability of those who never needed a map? Evening falls over the empire. The last rider of the day arrives at a mutatio, a relay station where tired couriers swap out horses and scrolls under the fading glow of oil lamps. The road he traveled like thousands of others has remembered his footsteps, as it has remembered all those who ran before him, because the roads of Rome did more than carry carts and armies. They carried thought, they carried connection, and they carried it without the modern trappings we think are essential. No street names carved in stone, no organized zip code districts, no numbered boxes outside homes. Instead, they relied on the soft infrastructure of familiarity. Who lived where, who knew who, and which temples stood near which fig trees. Human infrastructure. And yet, it worked. More than worked, it thrived for centuries. Back in Rome, a senatorial clerk finishes logging the day's dispatches. He stores the last scroll in a box to be archived in the Temple of Saturn's record chamber. These scrolls, hundreds, thousands, are not categorized by postcode, but by person, by origin, by purpose. He does this every evening, quietly, without ceremony. As Rome expanded, so did its postal innovations. By the 3rd century, some emperors began allowing limited non-governmental use of the cursus publicus merchants or officials with special permissions. Others attempted to reform its pace or to clamp down on misuse. But with every reform came the same challenge: no zip codes, no barcodes, just people moving across miles of land, with names in their heads and messages in their hands. And when the empire began to falter, the roads remained but the messages slowed. As provincial security declined, so did the reliability of delivery. Roads once kept clean by legionnaires began to crumble. Monchones fell into disrepair. The great network dimmed, bit by bit. When Rome finally broke into fragments, so too did its postal pulse. But the memory of it endured. Even in the early Middle Ages, monks and rulers tried to recreate fragments of the Roman postal system, its reliability, its relay structure, its promise that a message whispered in Gaul could still be heard in Asia Minor within weeks. And today, much of what Rome built still lies beneath our feet. Modern highways in Europe often follow the same lines as Roman roads. Cities still mark the milestones carved in stone, half erased by time. Even the idea of relays and routing still echoes faintly in how we move data and letters now. But Rome's couriers, those quiet, relentless messengers, are mostly forgotten. No statues were raised in their honor. No poems written for the man who carried a death sentence across mountains, or the boy who delivered a wedding request at dawn. And yet they connected an empire without knowing they were doing anything extraordinary. They ran. They remembered. They delivered. And as you now sit quietly beside the ancient path of the Via Ignatia, listening to the wind whistle between cypress trees, you ask yourself, what have we gained in speed, if we've forgotten the value of trust in a message carried by hand? What have we lost in a world where connection no longer requires presence, but somehow feels more distant than ever? Night is falling across the steppes of 13th century Mongolia. The wind has died down. The horses are still. The stars are coming out, sharp and endless, above the round dome of a felt-covered Jura nomadic home built not for luxury, but for survival. Inside, warmth clings to the wool-lined walls. The scent of cooked mutton and boiled milk lingers. A child yawns. A grandmother tucks a sheepskin blanket beneath his chin. The fire in the center of the room crackles low. And then someone speaks, but not to a person. To the fire. You are witnessing an ancient ritual, one not written down, but passed through flame and breath, the quiet, nightly tradition of Mongols. Murmuring to fire before sleep, this was not superstition. It was belief, reverence, a way of honoring the force that made life possible in one of the world's harshest climates. To the Mongols, fire was more than heat. It was sacred, alive, it heard, it remembered. The hearth flame gal was central to family life, not just physically at the center of the Jur, but spiritually too. It linked the living to their ancestors. It bridged the material world and the unseen. It was never left to die without ritual. And so each night, before sleeping, the household addressed it. The words weren't elaborate. A few murmured lines. Thanks for warmth, for boiled tea, for cooking meat, for keeping the wolves away. Sometimes it was a whisper from the head of the household. Galinez, Tamanai Setgalag Medij Bay Garai. Spirit of the fire, understand our hearts. Sometimes the words were casual. A grandmother reminding the flame to stay strong until morning. A child telling the fire what they dreamed about last night. You watch as a woman middle-aged, face weathered from wine, leans forward and pokes the fire gently. Sparks dance upward. She doesn't speak yet. She listens first. The fire shifts. Then she says, softly, may you keep my children safe while we sleep. No one responds. No one needs to. The fire has heard. This wasn't a performance. It was ritual woven into routine. The flame was treated with care. Ashes were never kicked. Firewood was placed gently. If something fell into the hearth, especially food, it was not retrieved or cursed. It was considered an offering. To curse. The fire was to bring misfortune. In Mongol cosmology, the fire was connected to Tengri, the sky spirit, and to Etiganik, the earth mother. Fire was their emissary. To speak to the flame was to speak through time and space. As you sit cross-legged by the hearth, the night deepens. A young boy asks the fire, will there be wind tomorrow? His mother smiles, not correcting him. The Fire, she knows, won't answer in words but maybe in smoke, in flicker, in silence. And all around you the quiet grows not emptiness, but fullness. No one rushes to bed. The family sits a while longer, staring into the orange core of their small domestic sun. The flame steadies, breathing slows, and you wonder, with the firelight dancing in your eyes, what did the Mongols understand that by speaking softly to the flame, they could somehow sleep not only in warmth but in peace? The night outside has gone black. Moonlight skims over the grasslands, but inside the jar, the world shrinks to the flicker of the central hearth. The logs have broken into glowing coals. The flames are lower now, tamed, listening, still. No one sleeps yet. This is the quiet hour of the fire. In Mongol tradition, this time just after the evening meal and before deep sleep was sacred. It was believed that the boundaries between the worlds were thinnest then, the world of humans, the world of spirits, the world of ancestors. And the fire, it sat in the center of it all. You now notice details you didn't earlier. The hearth is clean cleared of stray ash. No sharp metal touches the flame. A ladle, made of carved bone, lies nearby. No one pokes at the embers without reason. There is respect here, even in the smallest gesture. You recall what you were told earlier by the elder of the family. Do not spit in the fire. Do not speak harshly over it. The fire carries our words upward, because to Mongol families, fire was not just a domestic utility. It was a silent guest, a witness, a participant in family life, and sometimes it welcomed other guests. There are tales whispered in the glow of the coals about ancestors arriving silently during the night, drawn to the warmth of the hearth. These spirits did not knock. They didn't make sounds. They came as flickers in the flame, shifts in the smoke, dreams that lingered beyond dawn. To invite them, people left small offerings near the fire. A piece of meat, a drop of milk, a wisp of incense root burned just before sleep. Nothing extravagant, just a reminder. We have not forgotten you. And when illness came to a household, the fire became a healer. Herbs were sprinkled into the embers, not to cook, but to cleanse. Their smoke, wafting through the jar, was said to chase out dark spirits. Sometimes, shamans sat by the fire all night, chanting low verses while stirring glowing coals with special sticks. Even naming a child was done near fire. It was common for newborns to be passed over the hearth once, twice, 3 times depending on custom, not for warmth, for blessing. The fire, it was believed, would mark the child's soul, link it to the ancestors and grant a long life, and yet the rituals were always quiet. There was no dramatic shouting, no spectacle. Fire rituals, like fire itself, were subtle. They warmed from within. You watch now as the oldest woman in the jar removes a small pouch from a corner shelf. Inside twigs of juniper, carefully tied with string, she adds one to the coals. A faint sweetness rises in the air. She closes her eyes, says nothing, but in the smoke you feel something shift. Not outside, inside. The room is filled not with light but with memory, because in Mongol sleep rituals, talking to fire was not about changing the world. It was about remembering you were part of it. That long before beds and clocks and phones. There was warmth and breath and night and stillness. As the family begins to settle, the fire is not snuffed out. It is banked. Coals are covered carefully to keep the heart of the flame alive until morning. Letting it die entirely would be a mistake. The fire must sleep, chew but lightly, and as you wrap yourself in a wool blanket, feet pointed respectfully away from the hearth, another rule. You ask yourself, what if, in learning to speak to fire, we were also learning how to speak more gently to the world and to ourselves? Before the dreams arrived, morning light breaks over the horizon, faint and silver. Inside the jar, the fire has not gone out, not fully. The banked embers, hidden beneath ash, still pulse faintly with life. One by one, the family rises. No one speaks immediately. The first act of the day is not breakfast, not chores. It's to greet the fire. The elder stirs the coals gently with a curved stick. No jabbing, no poking. He uncovers the glowing core, adds a few dry twigs and breathes steadily. No bellows, no urgency, just breath. In a moment, the flame returns not like a roar, but like a memory rekindled. Then, a quiet phrase, Sein Wilse Geljelek Bolchegai. May good deeds continue. The day begins as the night ended with words to the fire. You now understand what this flame means to a Mongol household. It is not merely warmth or light. It is history. It is trust. It is a silent witness to birth, to death, to quiet dinners and fierce windstorms. It is the center of the home not just in layout, but in spirit. Even when families moved packing up the jar, loading carts with their lives, the hearthstones were often carried along. Some even took embers, wrapped carefully in wool or ashes, so the next fire would be born of the last. Continuity mattered, but fire was more than domestic. It was national. Mongol leaders, including Genghis Khan himself, invoked the sacredness of fire in state rituals. Before battles, they lit flames as a sign of unity. After victories, they offered libations into the fire. To burn meat improperly, to mock a fire's flicker, to let it die unattended, these were not small mistakes. They were dishonors. And even today, across the Mongolian steppe, in cities and tents alike, some still whisper to the flame. Modern homes may have stoves, gas heat, light switches, but for those who remember, the old ways remain. The fire is still greeted, still banked at night, still thanked in the morning. Not because of superstition, because of something deeper, because the fire is the last thing seen before sleep, and the first thing tended when we wake. And perhaps, just perhaps, the ritual of fire tending is what helped the Mongols survive the harshest winters, the longest nights, the most uncertain days. They didn't need clocks or calendars or lullabies. They had flame and words and silence. As you leave the jar, stepping into the morning light, the smell of smoke still clings to your sleeves. You glance back one last time inside. The hearth glows again, modest, steady, watchful.